Right, but speaking of which, it is time for the Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, is it over for Rishi Sunak? So let me take you back a few months when Partygate was dominating the headlines and the Prime Minister Boris Johnson was facing increasing pressure on his position in number 10. Bubbling under the surface was the Chancellor Rishi Sunak, seen as the golden boy of the Conservative Party, a possible replacement for Boris Johnson and a future Prime Minister in the making. Fast forward to the last few weeks, and that image has well and truly taken a hit. A spring statement that was slammed for not addressing the cost of living crisis, and now a more personal focus making the front pages. The Chancellor's multi-millionaire wife, Akshat Murthy, choosing to avoid UK tax under the rules that apply to people who opt for non-domiciled status. She now has agreed to pay UK tax on her overseas income. And then, on Friday, it also emerged that the Chancellor has held a US green card, meaning he had registered himself as a permanent resident in the US. So has Rishi Sunak gone from golden boy to potentially gone boy in a matter of months? Well, I'm joined by political commentator Benedict Spence. Benedict, talk to me then. How much damage has Rishi Sunak done to his reputation over the last few weeks, would you say?
I think the damage is probably fairly significant, but I don't think it's fatal. And I'd say it's not fatal purely by the existence of the man who lives next door to him in Downing Street. Boris Johnson has shown that if you have the right amount of sort of gravitas and the wherewithal and a little bit of shamelessness, actually you can get away with almost anything in politics, certainly under this administration. So I wouldn't necessarily say that it is fatal, that it's all done, but I don't think actually that Mr. Sunak is a similar character to Mr. Johnson. I don't necessarily think that he has the stomach for it. He's never really been through any sort of downturn politically in his career so far. And the whispers that he was perhaps considering his position over the latter stages of the week yesterday suggests that maybe he doesn't really have the stomach for it. And I mean, I happen to think that it was always very foolish that people were suggesting that he was a likely candidate to be Prime Minister ever after he was lumped with the job of the economic recovery post-pandemic. That was always going to be very difficult. And he was a very green MP even at that stage. So I don't think that it's going to go uphill from here, but I don't think that it has to be the end of the road if he doesn't want it to be.
You sort of compare it. It sounds like you're slightly comparing it. You were saying that basically you can get away with anything. But I think, personally, this is very different, because if you are you are the sort of author of a tax or a budget that requires people to really tighten their belts, then it turns out, and pay more tax, and it turns out that you, in your family, are benefiting from avoidance schemes, then that's not a good look for the Chancellor. And it's not just this. I think this goes deeper than that, because at the same time we've all got a national insurance hike, which he's put together. Do you not think that's different?
Certainly it's not a good look, but he's not broken the law, and nobody's suggesting that he's broken the law. Everything he's done is within the confines of what is legal, whereas there were, of course, suggestions that, although minor breaches, what Boris Johnson and other members of Number 10 got up to during Partygate was against the law. So actually it's slightly different. And I also think that there's a discrepancy, actually, in the way that we are treating Mr. Sunak's wife compared to, again, the Prime Minister's wife, Carrie Johnson. Whenever there is any suggestion that she has any sort of involvement in the running of Downing Street or in crafting policy, straight away out come Number 10 and say, oh, this is a sexist attack, she has nothing to do with government, she's completely off limits. That doesn't seem to be the case for the Chancellor's wife. So again, I think actually it is about how much stomach you have for the fight.
Doesn't it depend
Sorry, say again.
I was going to say, doesn't it depend, though, on what is done? And actually, I wouldn't say that Boris Johnson, Carrie Johnson's got an easy ride at all. I mean, a couple of months ago, people were being vile to her. I think that this is different. Don't you think it's different? I mean, that company, so Emphasis, the company that she has a share in, I think they've got about £500 million worth of public sector contracts as well. And that was not declared in his minister's interest. So there is more to this, and it's all about, when it comes to things like money, people are very, that cuts deep.
People are, but then, people had to live their lives under lockdown for a very long time, and some people had to see family members die. They saw businesses go under, and they don't necessarily blame Rishi Sunak for that. They blame Boris Johnson for that. And I do think, actually, that we massively, do a disservice to the anger that is felt by a lot of people if you say that what Boris Johnson did, for example, is not that big a deal, but that what Rishi Sunak did is a huge deal. We are actually only at the beginning of the economic recovery. Now, let us say that actually Rishi Sunak is able to pull the UK out of a bit of a financial hole if he holds on. Actually, then he might well be hailed as a hero in much of the same way that Boris Johnson has been able to turn his public image around. And, you have to say that the Chancellor, you would assume he would back his own economic strategy for getting us out of the situation. Were he to do that, perhaps people would be a lot more sympathetic towards him. That's why I say I think it's a lot more about character. I'm not saying that people should be allowed to get away with anything in politics. But what I am saying is that this is a government that has shown in the past that it has members at the top who are prepared to try to get away with almost anything. So if Mr. Sunak is cut from the same sort of cloth, there is a playbook at hand to suggest that he could weather the storm.
Well, you might be right. He might be cut from the same cloth because some of those things that we've discovered. Well, Benedict, thank you very much. Benedict Spence, he's a political commentator. Lovely to have your company this afternoon.